Today, you are going to get a front row seat to the memorable Springbok career of John Allan. John, welcome to Front Row Rugby.
Thank you, Peter. It's lovely to be part of it.
Now, just before we begin our conversation, here's a look at today's trivia question. In 2021, Jacques Nienaber became Springbok coach. Who was his first test match against? Now, if you know the answer to the question, you can put it in the comment section down below. We'll also find out if John knows the answer, but we'll do that at the end of our conversation. John, I want to start in the early 1990s. You were playing for Scotland. You represented them at the World Cup in 1991. I know that you didn't play at the 1995 Rugby World Cup, but obviously you were in the country. Just give me a sense of how you experienced the differences in the way the two tournaments were organised.
91, obviously, it was my Scotland days, and it was taking place in the UK and in France. So you obviously had to travel. So the good part from the Scotland perspective is that we had most of our games at Murrayfield. So obviously with the passionate Scottish crowd, having your home games or having your World Cup games at your home stadium helped Scotland tremendously, which is probably why we got through into the semi-final and unfortunately lost by a drop kick to Rob Andrews in the semi-final. And it was a wonderful experience being part of that. As you know, it hadn't been long since World Cups had taken place. 87 was the first one. So this was the second one after that. So there was a few learning curves that had to be done, but ultimately it was run very successfully. And and it was a great experience. And in even the difference between the modern World Cups and the World Cups in that era is that after the game, we had a lot of time spent with whoever we were playing with, and a lot of beers were shared and a lot of stories were told, and you make friends quite. I still have friends from that day till currently, and that's probably the difference. In the modern World Cup, they don't interact straight after the game. They have obviously got other plans and they have to do some planning and go through tapes and stats and all that, whereas we didn't do that. So the 95 World Cup, going back to that, so I was actually part of the 95 Springbok squad. And what few people don't know or do know is that that when Dalton got sent off, I got called to come and replace him. But unfortunately, I got called into a meeting with Ian McIntosh, and Mac said to me, "You're going to get a call from Kitch Christie." So they called me, and this was a Friday afternoon, and Kitch said to me, "John, I've booked your plane and your ticket for to come up because you're going to take. I want you to be part of the squad for the next game, which was the following weekend in the quarterfinal against Samoa." And I said to Kitch, "Fantastic, thank you very much." And the reason why they wanted me part of it because I had been in the bigger squad, I knew all the codes and I knew all the moves and the likes of that. So, and I was at the time I was probably the most experienced hooker. So I said to him, "That's wonderful news, but what time is training on Saturday?" He told me 11 o'clock. I said, "Well, I'll get on the early flight and I'll be there for training." He says, "What do you mean? I booked your ticket now." I said, "Well, unfortunately, I'm actually on my way to play in the Murray Cup final for my club, and I'm the captain of my club, and we're playing against Collegians, which is our biggest rival." And I said to him, "Kitch, you would know that because you coached my club previously, and you know how the rivalry between Glenwood All Boys and Durban Collegians are." Anyway, he said to me, he wasn't happy at all, but he said, "Okay, that's fine. I'll see you in the morning." Anyway, Mac said to me when I put the phone down, "John, are you stupid? This is a World Cup." And I said to Mac, "Yes, I understand it's a World Cup and I will be there in the morning, but my club is who made me. I came from club rugby system. And Glenwood, I went to Glenwood school, and Glenwood always is close to my heart. And I'm the captain. And this is 3 o'clock, the kickoff 6. We won't find a replacement in the short space of time. So I have to play the game." So anyway, I played the game, and Swayze the Brain, funny enough, was actually my coach at the time. He'd just finished playing and he was coaching Glenwood All Boys. And no one knew about the phone call that I received from Kitch. And anyway, only Ian McIntosh knew. So I play the game, and 10 minutes before the end, I feel my twinge in my calf. So I go to the side of the field and I say to Swayze, I think he must put the reserve on. I didn't want to tell him why. Well, I told him I've got a twinge in my calf. So he just said to me, no. In those days, deep heat, he gets the deep heat out and he rubs my calf and he says, no, you got to go back on because the score is 9-all. And we need you on the field for the last 10 minutes. So I ran back onto the field. And 5 minutes before the end, I got a pass around the touchline and I sprinted down the touchline and I snapped my calf. So my calf muscle was snapped. Anyway, carried off the field. Ian McIntosh comes down to the training, to the change room, and he goes ballistic and he says, okay, we have to phone Kitch and tell him that you are now unavailable. So I had to phone Kitch, and that wasn't a pleasant phone call. And I won't tell you what he told me, but you can understand. But ultimately, I'm now out of the World Cup as well. But at the same time, so people say to me, would you ever have changed your decision again? And I probably wouldn't have changed my decision because, I mean, had I played, then potentially I could have been, I would have won a gold medal in the 95 World Cup, and I would have had a semi-final in the 91 World Cup for two different countries. But at the end of the day, that didn't happen. And if you worry about what happens in the past, then you'll never go forward. But it also gave the opportunity for Chris Rousseau to come in and create him and give him the opportunity to be a World Cup winner and things like that. And Chris is a wonderful guy. And I'm very happy that he got that opportunity and he won the World Cup. As far as the organization goes, I mean, a good friend of mine, Craig Jameson, ran the 95 World Cup. And he came in 91 to see how the World Cup was run in 91. And I had quite a few conversations with him. So I think the 95 World Cup in South Africa, what made it special, because it was here in South Africa. South Africa had their home games, like I did with Scotland. They had their home games on home soil, which ultimately helps you through the rounds and with the home crowd fans. And the fact that South Africa won and Nelson Mandela was there made it that much more special. And it was brought the whole country together, as you know. And yeah, so it was a fantastic time. Even though I was on crutches at the game, I still had a fantastic time.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not hit the like button?
That is an incredible story, John. Quite amazing. So let's go back before 95, but after 91. You made your Springbok debut in a test match off the bench against Australia. Talk to me about that day.
So it was Uli Schmidt was the number one, and Uli and I actually were in the army together, and we used to play against one another in the army. And yeah, so we knew each other very well. I respected Uli. I thought he was a fantastic hooker, great rugby player. And it was just ultimately he's a competitor. In those days, you had to be injured before you got onto the field, because I knew he ain't, and he was tough. He doesn't get injured too often, but that particular day he got injured. And he came off the field, and it was a fantastic experience to actually run on at the time. And then ultimately, when Uli finished after that tour, then I became the number one, and I took over because my dream was to run out the tunnel. First, every team that I play for, that's why people say, why do you run so fast out the tunnel? Because that's what I dream. I dreamt when I played schoolboy, first team running out the tunnel. I dreamt when I played Sharks, running out the tunnel. When I played Scotland, running out the tunnel. And now, finally, my dream, because it was my father's dream that I played for Scotland, and my dream growing up was to play for South Africa. And finally, when I ran out the tunnel, I'd ultimately known that I've achieved something that I've worked hard for.
So, John, as you say, you were then the starting hooker for the Springboks. I want to go into 1994 now. We started the international season with a 2-test series at home against England. We got hammered in the first test in Pretoria. And then the following week, I know Ian Mack made quite a few changes, but it was almost as if it was the other way around. We then dished out the hiding to the English at Newlands in Cape Town. What made the difference?
A funny story Ian Mack told us when he left the field at Loftus. One of the crowd shouts down into the tunnel and says, McIntosh, save us. So Mac looked up and thought, oh, I can't believe I've got a friendly face in Loftus Versfeld. When he looked at the guy says, resign. That's what he said to Mac in there. So, yeah, there was obviously, I think the reason we lost is we were complacent. We England had struggled against some of the provincial teams prior to the tests, and they I think they'd even lost. I think even when the Sharks played them, we might have beaten them. I can't remember. My memory doesn't serve me that well nowadays. But the main reason of the change around was we knew we were very disappointing at Loftus. And you would think it would have helped us because Loftus being at altitude should actually help us as opposed to England. And now we're going down to Newlands and we're playing at sea level. It would potentially have helped them. And I think that's also got into our brains. We thought the hardest game would be at Loftus. Would be at Cape Town Stadium, Newlands, and not at Loftus. So when we did lose, obviously there was a lot being said and everyone's head was on the line. I'll never forget that training session. Louis Late was there. They were all there. All the selectors were there. And you sat down and you thought, oh, here it comes, man. We're all in for the chop here. And then when they announced your name, it was like, phew, sigh of relief, because then at least you can have redemption. You can try and redeem what happened at Loftus. And I think, I'll never forget that Friday. That Thursday when the forwards got together and between ourselves, we decided we got hammered at Loftus. Now we're the ones going to dish out the hammering. In fact, our goal is not to just beat them, but beat them by the score, bigger margin than we lost at Loftus. So we went into the game with a completely different mindset. We went in there to get stuck in from the word go. And we even had this a new rucking technique that we had been working on to get, because they were slowing the ball down the whole time. So we wanted to get them out of the way. And I think that first ruck, I think 3 of the English players came rolling out the other side. Their shirts at the back completely torn off, and stud marks down their backs. And when we looked at that, that's the way we're going to treat you. And I think they were then taken aback at the aggression and the determination of our team at that particular moment. And I think that was the reason for the turnaround.
And then after that, we went to New Zealand. How tough was that tour?
Any tour to New Zealand is tough, no matter. The biggest thing that I always joke about when you go to New Zealand, it's funny how you can never find a scrum machine in New Zealand. I think what they do is they lock them up in the sheds because they don't want to give you that extra bit of training against on a scrum machine. So they're hardcore. They want to win at all costs, and anyone you play in New Zealand will always be difficult. But yeah, and it's a long tour as well. Those days we toured for a relatively long period, and the weather also sometimes isn't as kind. The game in Rotorua, I think you couldn't determine who was the home team and who was the away team because of you were just covered in mud, and that. But yeah, it was, as I said, all tours to New Zealand are hard.
I've had Tiaan Strauss and Ian McIntosh on the show previously, and both of them have told me that they believe that we could have won that series because we only lost the first 2 tests fairly narrowly, especially the second one, and then the third one was obviously a draw. What do you think? Yeah,
there's no doubt. I think the margin between the 3 tests was something like 6 or 5 points over a 3-test series. That's virtually nothing. That's 1 try difference. The first game, no doubt, we knew that we had their backs against the wall, especially in the forwards. But handling errors let us down. And in the second test, it was more even game. And again, we made some, some critical mistakes in moments when had that not happened, we would have beaten them. But the funny thing is, when you leave on both those tests, when we left the field, it's as if you say we lost that game. They didn't beat us. We lost. That was in both those games. And then on the third game, how we didn't win that, I'll never know. But we did. We drew it. But we were the possession, territory, everything was all in our favor. And yeah, and I suppose. If you look back in your career and you think, would you have changed something, or what would, if something went differently, what would you like to be? It would have been that Test series. I think we could have won that Test series 3-0, and that would have certainly helped us going forward. And not many people beat New Zealand 3-0 in a Test series.
Certainly not. So, John, you've told me the 1995 story. So let's go into 1996 now, when Andre Markgraaff became the Springbok coach. I've heard that there was a bit of a rift in the camp, mostly around money. Obviously, the game had now become professional. The 1995 players were on lucrative contracts compared to what the other guys were on. What can you tell me about that?
It was a bad time, actually. It was them and us, basically. I'm for example, the starting hooker, and James Dalton's on the bench, but he gets paid 4 times more than I do. So it just leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And then you had the other issue was around Francois Pienaar was the World Cup captain, but he's not even in the team. He got dropped, and Gary Teichmann is the captain, but again, Gary gets paid per game and doesn't get a contract and things. So the it's just not a good business model to work off when you in from a business perspective. Never mind what happens on the rugby field. And there was also animosity on the rugby field, because I think the 26 players that played in the World Cup, probably only half of them were playing now in 96. So it, as I said, it was them and us type scenario. You had no chance. We still produced results on the field, but that's because we had a talented group overall. But wasn't a good time.
And then after the Tri Nations, you were pretty much out of the picture. How disappointed were you that your Test career ended there?
Yeah, no. Funny enough, Markgraaff had called me in and said to me that basically there's too many English-speaking people in the top 5. So if we don't win on Saturday, you're out. So I said, oh dear, that's terrible. Maybe I should learn to speak Afrikaans more. So anyway, it was a weird thing to say. And he even mentioned Broederbond. I'm not happy. I said, who's the Broederbond? I don't know who they are. Anyway, the bottom line is, at least he did give me a warning. We had to beat New Zealand in Loft at Newlands. Otherwise, I was out. We were actually beating them 19-10. And I thought, I'm just saved my bacon here. And there's 10 minutes before the end. And then Os went off the field. Francois got carried off the field. And then actually New Zealand played sublime rugby. It's the first time I've ever seen continuity. Continuity only started about then, where we were keeping the ball in phases, but it would normally break down. But that was the game. I've never done so many tackles in the last 10 minutes in my entire life, because they kept the ball over 12, 15, 16 phases, and they scored a try at the very end to win the game. And we lost because they played sublime rugby at the time. Anyway, I was out after that.
John, you mentioned Markgraaff there. We've spoken a little bit about Mac. Those were the 2 coaches that you played under in terms of international rugby for the Springboks. What would you say, in your experience, are the differences between the 2 men and their coaching philosophies?
Well, the one's Afrikaans, the other one's English, for one. So they do have different philosophies in the way they think. But I think the difference is Mac was open to ideas, and he would actually listen to players. Whereas Andre, I think, was more for krach. He was the old school type coach, forward domination. I remember I was doing 150 scrums before playing a game up in Free State, before playing Australia that week. And when our whole front row was out the next day, had to get physio. They were physio for 2 days after that, because of the amount of scrums that we were doing against a Free State, 2 Free State teams that were taking turns. One would do 5 scrums, the other one would do 5, and we carry on it. And we run around the pole and back and scrum, where they stay and wait for us. It was brutal. And to me, that was old school. That's sure. If we did half those scrums, we'd have still been a powerful scrumming unit.
So, John, who was your toughest opponent?
I'd say Sean Fitzpatrick was and internationally Sean Fitzpatrick, locally Uli Schmidt.
Another thing that I ask all of my guests is to share a funny moment from their time with the Springboks with us. Can you do that?
Funny moment with the Springboks. I might be dropping myself into something here, but no, there was many funny moments. I think the one was we myself and Steve Atherton, when we toured New Zealand, it was the beginning of the tour, and we missed the bus to go to the welcome part, the welcome event, the event where they do their Maori dances, and they give us the sword and they welcome us to the shores of New Zealand, and so that the night before, we obviously arriving in the country, so we had a little bit of a party, and our alarm didn't go off, so the bus left without us, and we got downstairs and we missed the bus, and we were like 20 minutes behind the bus. And I knew if we don't get ahead of that bus, we are being sent to the next plane home. So best we make a plan. So I asked the concierge, who's the fastest driver here in Hamilton? Because we need to get to Rotorua. So I said, no, his brother is a fast driver or whatever. Can he bring his car? So he brought his car, and Steve Atherton and I jumped in the car, and we said, we'll pay you double as long as you get that bus, which has got a 20-minute lead and in an hour, and just over an hour journey. So you had to go foot flat. Anyway, 5 minutes before reaching Rotorua, we overtook the bus, and then we were hiding under on the floors of the car so that no one could see us in from the bus. Look down and look in, and then as we got to Rotorua ahead of them, we jumped out, we hid behind the bush. And as the team got out the bus, because what happens is they march, and then all the Maori dressed in their traditional outfits, they march towards them. So it's like you have two groups marching together, and we're hiding in the middle. And as we got closer, we just snuck out in our number ones into the group, and I snuck up to our manager, Yanni Engelbrecht, who was in charge of discipline, and he would have been the one to send us packing if we weren't there. And as he went to receive the spear, and at the welcoming spear, I turned around to him and I said, hey, well, Yanni, this is fantastic. And he looked at me, and he couldn't quite understand it because he knew I wasn't on the bus, but how come I'm here? But anyway, with all the commotion and the ceremony that was going on, he forgot even to ask us why we weren't on the bus. So we managed to stay in the squad and play the first game and carry on playing all the other games. But we came close.
That's a great story, John. So what else are you doing? What are you up to these days?
So I run a company called My World. It's a loyalty company based in Joburg. It's actually an international company. So I look after South Africa. It's in 55 countries worldwide. Probably the biggest loyalty program in Europe, but relatively small in South Africa with 250,000 members. But yeah, that's what keeps me busy nowadays. So it's a technology company. And ultimately, that's what I studied. Is actually I'm a computer programmer, believe it or not, although I haven't touched programming for a very, very long time. But that's what I'm doing now.
Sounds good. So, John, before we finish off, let's take a look at the trivia question again from earlier. In 2021, Jacques Nienaber became Springbok coach. Who was his first test match against? Do you know the answer, John?
I'm going to guess. In fact, if I was a clever boy, I'd have Googled that while you're asking me questions. But clearly, I've had too many hits to my head, and I didn't think about that. But I think it was against Wales.
Not a bad guess. The correct answer is, in fact, Georgia.
Oh, they had those friendlies before Wales. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
That's right, Georgia, and then after that was the British and Irish Lions, which of course we won, thankfully. John, let me say it was lovely having you on Front Row Rugby today, an absolute pleasure, and I hope that we can have you on again in the future.
No problem. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Last time on Front Row Rugby, I had former Springbok hardman Andre Markgraaff on the show. You can go and watch that. It's appearing on the screen right now. Next time, we'll have 1995 Rugby World Cup winner Henny LaRue here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, why not tackle the like button? You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any content from Front Row Rugby. See you next time.